Halloween. It's heist time.
Well guys, the tradition continues. Happy Halloween once again, and welcome back to another installment of the Universal Monster Movie Reviews, of which I've now done 3 of them, which is pretty impressive. If you want to follow along in the saga, I suggest you watch them in order of video release, since they kind of build off one another. Otherwise, let's get into this year's, which is The Mummy, released in 1932. So let's settle in and talk about this movie, which, as I said about Frankenstein in that video, is the best one yet. Here we go. So, like I said, we are 3 movies into Universal's house style, with each installment being both an improvement and an experiment. They're trying new things and seeing what works is a staple of the era, and out of the 3, this film, and by extension Universal as a studio, has definitely found its footing at last. So this film begins with the original Universal logo, which I'm happy to say has been included. I'm happy to see that it's here and that they didn't pull a Warner Brothers or Disney in replacing it with the new logo. So shortly after the logo, we are given, once again, opening title credits. These are no different to the previous, though the title scene in this one is way cooler than the previous ones. There's a little miniature thing that they do, it's pretty sweet. After the credits, the movie gives us expositional text about the scroll of Thoth. Is it Thoth or Thoth? Hang on. It is Thoth. Thoth? Is that how you say that? Thoth. The scroll of sauce? Can I just say that instead? I'm just gonna say scroll of sauce. After the credits, the movie gives us expositional text about the Scroll of Sauce, which is infamous in the tale of Isis rising Osiris from the dead? Did I say that right? Which, don't worry, I won't mention this again at all.
Which contains the great spell by which Isis raised Osiris from the dead.
Then I will read the great spell with which Isis brought Osiris back from the grave.
Okay, yeah, I was kidding. That's all this movie talks about, is just that same story over and over. The first actual scene of the movie begins with an Egyptian burial site, to which we are introduced to a British Museum field exposition from 1921. We are introduced to 2 characters, both of whom are in the middle of examining their findings. So these 2 are Sir Joseph and Ralph Norton. Norton is Joseph's assistant, but for the sake of entertainment, let's call Joseph Indiana Jones and his assistant Dumbass. You'll see why in a second. We learn that, along with a bunch of broken pottery, they have uncovered an ancient tomb and a box with unknown contents. And though Dumbass is way more interested about the tomb, Indy is far more concerned about the box. So as Dumbass is pestering Indy about opening the box and making more discoveries, we are introduced to... Wait, no, dude, no freaking way! Ladies and gentlemen, returning for the 3rd time in a row, Edward Van Sloan. I'll give you guys one guess as to what his character is in this movie. Yeah, that's right. So as the doctor is examining the mummy, they're starting to piece together that the mummy may not have died before he was encased, rather he died in the coffin, not out. In addition, they notice that the coffin has been heavily damaged and figure out that it was done intentionally so as to prevent the mummy from reincarnation in the next life as well as the current. Dumbass is finally able to get Indy to open the wooden crate, to which there is a golden case, which contains an even smaller box within that. Once they pull out the final Russian nesting doll, Indy reads the notice that is printed, telling anyone to not open the box by any circumstances. And because Dumbass apparently has hearing problems as well as reading problems, he is overly eager to open the box anyway. When Indy and the doctor go outside to talk about Dumbass, he, of course, opens the box, to which there is an ancient scroll inside. As he proceeds to read the scroll and begins to transcribe it, the mummy awakens and steals the scroll from him and walks away. Dumbass begins to scream, and then starts to laugh uncontrollably. To be honest, this bit really gave me Doormat from Dracula vibes. It was pretty unnerving and was a nice touch to the movie. Pretty good. So fast forward 10 years later, there's a new expedition in the same area, and Indy's son is leading the expedition. We get some exposition about Dumbass and how he went insane and had died some years ago, but whatever, he was an idiot anyway. So if you're all wondering when this movie goes full goofy, don't worry, it really doesn't take long. Because at that moment, the mummy walks in. I'm sorry, what? Okay. So this movie is wanting you to believe that over the last 10 years, the mummy was able to re-enter society, learn the current languages, and also not be pointed out for having really just disgusting looking skin. I mean, look at his face, Jesus Christ. Anyway, the mummy has come to tell these men that he has found evidence of a tomb burial not far from where they are, and that they should check it out. And because this is the 1930s, the men hire a bunch of colored people and Egyptians to dig it up for them while they sit around. So, this is my biggest problem with this movie.
Here's something to break the monotony. There's a visitor coming up the trail from the Nile. Color, nationality?
Warning, this movie is kinda racist.
Yep, wonderful, great. So after what seems like probably about an hour, the servants were able to find the entrance to a princess's tomb, to which the white people stand up and make the official discovery. Yay! What follows is some newspaper articles about it, followed by shots of the new exhibit in the Cairo Museum for it. So the mummy is shown looking at the tomb, and then we have this really bizarre transition over to this girl. After a brief and awkward meeting with Indy, his son, and the mummy, we see that the mummy has a plan to resurrect the princess that was just discovered. However, instead of bringing her soul and body back from the dead, her soul kinda just like flies partially into the body of the woman, and then she becomes possessed and makes her way to the museum to finish the transition. I particularly love this scene because even though she's possessed, she has time to grab her fur coat and asks to have her car pulled around and then have them drive her to the museum. Like, what a stupid touch. It's pretty funny though. Thankfully for the girl, the museum doors are locked and Indy and his son are in their car and see her just kind of half-heartedly banging on the doors. Let me in! Let me in! And then once she collapses, Indy's son helps her into their car and they take her home. Now this portion of the movie feels a lot like Dracula. The doctor's telling everyone that she isn't allowed to leave the house, during which Indy's son begins to make a move on her, because that's what you do to someone who just went through a trauma, right? So he's talking to her about finding her and how she kind of looks familiar, but then goes entirely off script and says this.
You're partly Egyptian, aren't you?
Yes. Wait, how would you know that?
Well, after we'd worked among her things, I felt as if I'd known her. When we got the wrappings off, and I saw her face. You'll think me silly, but I sort of fell in love with her.
I'm sorry, you fell in love with a dead, mummified woman? Okay, we need to move on. We also learned that some mysterious activity has been cited at the museum, with one guard found dead of apparently natural causes. This continues for most of the movie, but it is obvious that the mummy has been behind it the entire time. So not only is the mummy behind the killings, but he's also figured out that the girl is the key to bringing back to life the princess, so he's been using this Jedi mind trick powers to brainwash her, which she's been muttering his name in a bunch of ancient Egyptian for the last few days. No big deal. This is the point in the story when, as has been the case the last two movies, the doctor pieces the whole thing together. Where the belief was that someone had broken in and stolen the mummy and the scroll 10 years ago, the doctor concludes, with no evidence whatsoever, that the mummy must have come back to life and walked off with the scroll. Man, what a career Edward Van Sloan has had in these three movies. He got to play the one character who almost feels like he has the knowledge of the movie's script while being surrounded by complete idiots. God, iconic. But unfortunately, we have reached the point in the film where things get very creepy between the mummy and the girl. Like, there's this scene where the mummy walks into the house, mind controls the servant at the door, and approaches the girl and just kind of looms over her in the most aggressively creepy way possible. Then later on, the mummy is able to summon her out of the house where she meets the mummy, and things are finally pieced together so they actually make sense. Okay, so for those who've been having trouble following so far, let's put the whole thing together. Okay. Back when the mummy was alive, his name was Imhotep. He was in love with the princess, but shortly into the relationship, she falls ill and dies. Unable to cope or come to terms with her death, Imhotep tracks down the scroll of sauce and attempts to bring her back to life. However, since this is a sin apparently, he is punished. How, you may ask? He too is buried, only he's buried alive and encased with the scroll. This part is so stupid, because the reason is to prevent anyone else from using it. And yes, they end up killing all the witnesses to the burial so you can't find it, but surely they must have been aware of accidental findings. Then what happens? The person who wants to use it and the forbidden item are together and then can be used at that point. Yeah, great work, guys. Okay, so now that he's mummified and alive again, he wants to bring her back, but the only way to do so is via this random girl. And because she's half Egyptian, it works for some reason since she has it in her blood. This is the movie's words, not mine, I swear. So now he's using Jedi mind tricks and the Force to kill those who will stop him and be able to bring her back from the dead as a mummified being like him, so they can live happily ever after. Am I getting that right? Okay, sure, whatever. That being said, though, this is my favorite part in the movie, particularly this overhead moving shot of this pensive looking device that the mummy uses to show his backstory. So after we learn all of that, he does some stuff to her so she can't remember any of it, and just for good measure, he kills the dog that she came with here, just to be sure. So once she returns home, they confine her to her room so she can't be around the mummy, but then the doctor changes his mind and goes, we must let her go near the mummy.
The next time the call comes, go to him.
Right after he's talking about how if she sees him again, she'll probably die since no one has been around him that many times and lived.
The pull is too strong to withstand and live.
So right before she's summoned, the mummy attempts to kill Indy's son, because earlier he had been successful in killing Indy after he tried destroying the scroll, but luckily for the son, he was able to use this, Isis pendant, which I guess has the power to counteract the mummy's powers. Okay, alright, almost done, thank God. Okay, where are we in the movie? Oh god, okay, we're at this part, right. So in the final act, as the mummy's about to kill her so she can become mummified undead like himself, she kind of begins to have second thoughts and cold feet, and Indy's son and the doctor burst in to distract him momentarily. During which the girl begins to pray to the Egyptian gods who decide to fucking disintegrate the mummy. The end. Okay, so now the movie's over. I thought it was actually really good in spite of my criticisms. I think I can safely say that Universal figured out what they wanted their movies to be in this one. I mean, guys, there's actually music in this one, which is awesome. I couldn't be happier to have it in there since it makes the scenes all the better. I mean, there's actually suspense in it now. It's awesome. Not to mention the plot feels a lot more sci-fi than the other ones, and the dialogue feels more integral, and the story a lot more intricate than the previous ones. This film has a lot more small improvements over the previous, which makes it a lot more enjoyable. It kind of feels like almost like a slow progression over time. Like, you kind of feel like they're actually learning and improving their films. So I'm going to give it the same score as the previous one, since there's still a lot of flaws, especially with like the racism and that sort of thing. But I mean, most importantly, it's the confusion of the story. It really doesn't make any sense. So same score as before. Still a good movie if you want something to watch this year. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the Halloween video. Again, if you want to watch the previous ones, you can check them out in the playlist in the end card. Feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in next year's monster review. Bye-bye.
What you are looking at are memories, in this case pertaining to one individual, Voldemort.
Marion, don't look at it. Shut your eyes, Marion. Don't look at it no matter what happens.
We dig, 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 dig in our mind the whole day through. To dig, 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 dig.
Vesper, come to me.
Daddy, is it really you?
Yes, my dear. I guarantee it. Would I lie?
Stop, don't come back.
Imhotep.
What's she saying? Udi, Osapti, Imhotep.
What language is that?
Sorry, I don't speak Italian.
Please take the Horcrux. You wouldn't be saying any of this if you hadn't been wearing it all day.
So, I have something else to show you. Photograph.
Have you seen this man?